Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our little presentation here on behalf of the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. I'm Eric Jones, and I'm going to be talking about the Ever Wiley statement of purpose in writing, whether you're applying for grants, whether you're applying for school, undergrad, grad. The statement of purpose is an important part of that. And often I think students don't know what it is. I didn't until I got some good advice and mentorship, and have been fortunate to have some training on what it is and help guide a lot of students as they endeavor to crack the code on what is wanted. And it often, what we want to see is, of course, is that good students write good statements of purpose. And what you don't want to see is that really great students, that because they don't know the genre or understand it, they strike out and are writing the wrong kind of thing for a statement of purpose. So that's what today's presentation is about. I'm going to share my screen with you on a little PowerPoint here. And yeah, we'll just go through it. So statement of purpose, we have here, what's the purpose? And let me start that presentation rather than, okay. So a good way to approach the statement of purpose is to understand the other side of the table. That is, the people who are maybe the faculty members or administrators who are in charge of the grant funding, who are just trying to decide who to give it to. So I think a good way to approach it is like, what are they looking for? What are they thinking about when it comes to the statement of purpose? And so I have some points here: candidates with clear, well-defined research interests, research interests that arise from training experience, demonstrated excellence, a diligent student who will remain committed for the long haul. So think of two candidates. One, what's the likelihood that this person will go on and use the training or the money they received, and it will continue to inform their work for years or even decades, as opposed to a student who might be impressive, but this funding will be one-off, right? It will just contribute to their what they're doing immediately and might not be used in the future by them. And I'm a historian, so I like to think this way, but I think it really helps on a statement of purpose. Your past, present, and future as they relate to the grant or the application in question. So if you look at this past, present, and future here, look up above to these other points I made. So your past is demonstrated excellence, right? And demonstrated excellence would different than you might write an undergraduate college essay statement of purpose, where if you read them from high school students, they're often like very broad, like, I'm interested in learning knowledge, I'm ambitious, I did all these impressive extracurricular things, right? Whatever, that's part of that genre. That is fine, but it's not very well suited for a statement of purpose in something that asks for specific kinds of skills, expertise, training, experience, and the like. And so relevant demonstrated experience, excellence, and then how that's your past, your present, like what I'm going to do, like I'm going to, engage in my program of study here seriously, and I'm going to take sorry, let me just make sure that we're letting other people in here if we've got Zoom participants. I think we're good. So candidates who have the training experience are important, and then they can show that they're going to do good things here and now at the university. And then they're going to go on, and this is going to affect their career or have an important role for them in the future. That's kind of an ideal model to think from. Another way to think about your statement of purpose is narrating your CV, or your resume, right? So you've got this statement of purpose that is in front of you, and the CV, I should say. How do we know if the person that you've attached it, if they're even looking at that statement of purpose, that CV, I mean. So your statement of purpose is a chance to narrate that resume, narrate your CV. So you can explicate, connect the dots. As I say here, explain why you were the person to be doing this work, project, degree, program. You can draw attention where you want it, and avoid unrelated, personal, kind of well-rounded type of details, and that make it, as I've said, this quite different than your typical undergrad essay. Oh, let's see. Just pausing here. Matt's asking Matt, let me make you the co-host here real quick. And I'll make you the host. Okay, so is that okay with you, Matt, if you're the host?
Yep.
And then I can still share screen. Okay, so people need to, yeah. Oh, and you need to enable my screen sharing.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, here we go. So your statement of purpose is your chance to narrate your CV. And a good way to approach it is that maybe they don't even look at my CV. You hope that they do, and you think they probably will, but it's your chance really to draw things that aren't obvious from the kind of bullet point structure that a CV is, to narrate that, to like, oh, it's interesting, that it's important that this research that I did built into this other project that I'm working on now, which will result in this application, publication, et cetera, right? It gives you a chance to connect those dots for the reader. Another way to think about the statement of purpose, in addition to narrating your CV, is as a persuasive thesis-driven essay. And the classic 5-paragraph persuasive essay that you probably had to do in high school or in communications courses as an undergrad. That's a pretty good model for thinking about the statement of purpose. Except in this one, your statement of purpose is a persuasive thesis-driven essay that has the thesis, my background, training, experience make me the perfect person to be doing your grant program, and with your funding, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And these are my plans afterward, career, or et cetera, or even closer term. So that's one way to think about how you're structuring your essay. Is that all right? Like this literal sentence should appear like in the first paragraph, like a good thesis-driven essay, like. And that gives clarity to the reader that, okay, they're going to talk about their training background, why they're a great candidate. They're going to talk about how that's going to be relevant to them here on our campus, and then give me an idea of where that funding is going to take them, where that grant support is going to take them, and plans afterward. And as they read through that statement of purpose, you have your introductory paragraph and your statement, and I'll talk a little more about that, with your thesis statement in there somewhere. And then your 3 paragraphs could be, right, your past, your excellence, as I had here, your demonstrated excellence, and what makes them likely to think you're a good candidate. Let's say you're applying to a language fellowship like the FLAS, a Foreign Language Area Studies Fellowship. If you say, hey, I spent a year learning Tagalog and, did well in that program. I'm doing international relations, so I'd like to also learn. I think Indonesia is going to be important to the my research in sort of comparative international relations for these reasons. And so the likelihood that I'll do well in Indonesian is demonstrated excellence because I did this already in learning Tagalog, right, and got good grades. So that's what I mean by your chance to do that. And so you could have a paragraph about your past, a paragraph about your present plans for how it's going to integrate and help your research at said institution, and then the third body paragraph could be your future career and other research plans beyond the phase of this grant, and then a conclusion paragraph. 5-paragraph persuasive essay is a really tight welcome model for, doesn't have to be, but that's not a bad plan to follow. All right, so how to customize your statement of purpose. It's really important that you follow the prompts. What you might not know is that in some grant applications, including the FLAS fellowship that apply for, there is a rubric, and the reviewers for those applications score points for every, maybe there's a total of 100 points, and they have 10 categories that have 10 points each. So you might knock it out of the park in 5 of those categories, but you completely refuse to, you didn't even address these other 5 that they mentioned in the prompt, asking you the question that prompts the statement of purpose. And so the best you're going to get is 50 out of 100. As or someone who might not have nearly as exciting research project as you have, but they went through the motions and at least got some scores in all those other categories, and they're going to eke out ahead of you, and they would get the funding and you wouldn't. So very carefully ask yourself, read it with a fine-tooth comb, like what are they asking very specifically for in this, the mission and the goals and the focus of this grant. The other one is look at the institution that is funding it, the school, the grant. Sometimes they have profiles of people who have gotten it. Let's say you're applying for a Fulbright, and you could see, past Fulbright winners. Go and read those synopsis of those people and their research. That lets you know that kind of like, I'm in a ballpark, or how can I better situation myself? Not you have to be exactly like them, but it gives you an idea. This has been funded in the past. The likelihood that I need to couch my research in a certain way, much better likely to be funded in the future. So that is really important to take careful consideration of the agency, reading their mission and goals and ambitions as an institution can help, if where relevant, frame your research. And then you tailor it. You tailor that statement of purpose to those things. And the Venn diagram, the more you can overlap sort of core of what you want to do with core of what the institution is looking for, that is the spot you want to be in. All right, so important questions to ask yourself as you are taking notes, preparing to write a statement of purpose. What do you want to study at your program, graduate school, undergraduate? Why do you want to do it? What experience do you have in this field? And then what do you plan to do with your degree once you have it? So this can be a sort of a primer as you're thinking about sketching out that persuasive, thesis-driven statement of purpose. You can think about how this might, if you have answers for these, that'll help you fill those in when you're actually writing and working on it. So I want to switch over a little bit, and because I think so kind of beautifully helps us phrase and think about the statement of purpose that we might want to do. I was lucky enough to get some training at the Social Science Research Council, and about writing a proposal or prospectus. And the SSRC, the Social Science Research Council, has a book that's been around for a while now, but it is great. You can find it, PDFs of this, The Art of Writing Proposals, from the Social Science Research Council. And what's great about the Social Science Research Council is that it is a very broad funding agency that, unlike say NSF, which is very, very obviously science focused, or FLAS, which is very language focused, like you can learn to the art of writing proposals that will be relevant to, because if you do it right, let's say if you're applying for a foreign language area studies fellowship with sort of the advice I'm giving you, that application with some tailoring will also could become a Fulbright application, right? Because you're talking about your background and experience. You're talking about your research and your current sort of interest. And you're talking about your future career goals. Now, let's say the Flash application is always going to have the kind of language. Why should we be giving this person money to learn Khmer? Or why should we be giving this money to learn Indonesian? Those questions need to be answered in that. But a lot of the context would work for many, even a job application. And that's looking for a specific kind of person doing a particular kind of thing. So the proposals for research funding, it's important to know that this is a genre unto itself. And I like to make this analogy, as unique and specific to the research process as a haiku might be to poetry, right? So the way to think about the genre of a research proposal, prospectus, statement of purpose is that, you think you have a good couplet, but it's actually a haiku contest, this poem. So you could be writing something that's not going to be evaluated well because the genre you missed on the genre. So writing proposals, it's essential to scholarship. Without it, you will starve. And as scholars can tell you that, it can be hard to get some funding. But if you get one, it often helps you get the next one. It can kind of snowball as you learn to do this, as you get better of learning to frame your research. Part of also to understanding from the other side of the table, a statement of purpose arises from the problems of an interdisciplinary committee. So, right, you might be an anthropology student, you might be a history student, but people from those fields are not necessarily going to be reading your proposal. And so you have to be able to talk and translate your work to those committees. And you have to learn to do it, there can be incomprehensible jargon and approaches across disciplines. So you have to learn to pitch it to a wider audience, to be able to say the things so that those insiders in the very specific subfield will know, like, oh, she gets it. This is like, she's really hitting on all the keys that she needs to for this one. But also the people who aren't specialists in that field at all. I have work overload right now. Faculty are grading papers, they have a lot of things that they're trying to do. And so you can't be obtuse or vague about, you've got to succinctly tell them. And also it helps them equitably judge a wide array of projects, everything from sort of a music internship to historical archival research that's performance-based, to archival one that is research archival based, right? So they have to be able to apples or science versus humanities. It helps them compare apples to oranges, and when they're deciding. Right. So what are these committees looking for? Conceptual innovation, methodological rigor, and rich substantive content. Now, part of this, the innovation and the methodological rigor one good thing to do is you talk to your letter writers, especially if they're in your field. And I hope you're cultivating people in your field to help write letters eventually. Those are people who can speak best to, so they can help you think, look, this is an innovative idea, but it's innovative because it's not interesting. No one's asking this question because it's not one, or probably more likely this question has been already approached in this way and it's not novel. Let's think of there's this need in the discipline. Like if the more that we can address that, it might be innovative and interesting. And methodological rigor that you show that you give some breadcrumbs to the people who might know something about your field, that I've done my homework, I've, where relevant, other scholars and their work, and James Scott said X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to argue A, B, and C in response to that, right? So you show that you have some, you don't have to drop names, but you can show this rigor, and then just good content about your own work. Capturing their attention is important. Your proposal should clearly project, what are we going to learn as a result of this proposed project that we don't know now? Why is it worth knowing? How will we know that the conclusions are valid? Now this, for like something like a FLAS application, it doesn't have to be, this is not as front and center as it might be if you're applying for a Fulbright application, right? Where, but it can, the more that you're able to say, hey, with this training, I'm gonna learn to speak Khmer, and with that, and you don't stop there. And with that Khmer, I want to interview, monks at 8 temples across, rural Cambodia, and sort of compare religious motivations post Khmer Rouge. We know this about that, but we still need to know a lot more about how Buddhism is being revitalized and rethought in the 21st century after the Democratic Kampuchea, right? So you can something that's specific, something that can capture the reader's attention, that, hey, this is worth doing, that's interesting. The more you can capture attention in that first paragraph, the better. So here's the SSRC has some really interesting examples that about how do I start like a proposal or a statement of purpose. And one way to do it is with questions, and you have to ask a lot of people if they think this is a good one. But are strong party systems conducive to democratic stability? Was the decline of population growth in Brazil the result of government policies? So, right, provocative, interesting, relevant questions to your work. And then you could say, with your funding in language training, I'm going to figure this out, right? Like, is democracy dead in Southeast Asia? I want to learn Burmese, and I'm going to ask these hard questions. And so you can start with a provocative, important, even it shouldn't be rhetorical either. It should be one that you can actually point to. You can also, you could start with your hypothesis of your research. They've got some examples here. Workers don't organize unions, unions organize workers. The success and failure of Corazon Aquino's revolution stems from its middle-class origins. Population growth coupled with loss of arable land posed a threat to North African food security in the next decade, right? So those are kind of this banner log line that says like, oh, okay, that's an important subject, I'm listening. And then you present your past, present, and future about why they should give you funding to do that. Clarity is important. As I said, someone outside your field will probably be the one reading this. You meet them halfway. No pretentious jargon. Obscure and verbose does not equal smart. The smartest people I've ever met at many great institutions in the world have been people who can translate their own interest in research to a broad number of people that they engage with. And so often obscurity and verbosity are window dressing for some academic insecurity, right? You don't have to do that, or pretentiousness. So learn to communicate outside your field bubble. Your reviewer, one way to think about it, your reviewer is your professor you've had in a class, every professor outside of your major. So think about that. All of those people you've taken class from, those might be your reviewers on a broad, in the different fields. So they need to understand what you're doing. And if they don't, you're not succeeding. A context is this, maybe some of the kind of the stakes that can help. What will be learned? How does it fill a void, contribute to our knowledge? It can precisely and succinctly summarize the current state of knowledge. In some cases, you can attach a bibliography, like for the FLAST application, there's no word limit, so you could put a little works cited at the bottom or a bibliography. That would be, you don't have to, but that's an indicator. And if it's a good one, to like, this person has done their homework, they get it. This money's not going to be wasted, right? They're serious students. This proves to reviewers that that you're in a conversation with those fields who know better. So you're in a conversation with people who have already done research, and you've thought about their work seriously, and we'll take it further. And you consider how relevant is this lacuna? Does this fill a space? Is this an important contemporary question that's being asked, et cetera. All right, and so if especially if you're an advanced student, like a graduate student applying for like a FLAS or a Fulbright, you can describe your methodology, like in kind of in that second body paragraph, we were talking about your present, what I'm going to do. You can talk about like, with this funding, it'll help me spend, full-time working on the language, which will help me read these documents. And I'm gonna, I'm taking these 2 research seminars in fall and spring, and I hope to make this translated stuff that with the language training is going to help me in advanced Lao to work on papers that I hope to present at a conference in the spring, and that might turn into a publishable work in the future. Right. So you set out your specific research plan. And, again, this is kind of more in the weeds, but how you tease that relationship of underlying forces from the massive data and experience that can show how you're going to come to your conclusions, and will they be valid? And, help your readers understand what are standards, what's innovative. You need to have a bit of both in your research, that, again, because true innovative geniuses come along, once in a generation, completely off the map. So most likely you're on the map, but you're pushing that boundary a little further, and that's fine, because so is everyone else. Be as specific activities you're going to plan to do, techniques you're going to use to analyze it, test the validity, tell them what you're doing. And this can be done kind of conclusively in like a foreign language area studies fellowship. Is like, these are the archives, the sources, the respondents that I'm gonna use with this language training. It's gonna help me do A, B, and C with this money. And again, in all things being equal, that puts you ahead of a student who doesn't. They seem talented student, bright, but they haven't really said what they're going to do with and how it's going to be implemented. And is where, if you can see the direct, like with this funding, I'm going to go work as a liaison with Quran and Burmese parents immigrant parents in Chicagoland area to sort of help their students prepare for student and career success. Like, right, that's a much better description of like, oh, that's an important use of that language that I'm willing to support. Uh, Other advice, this takes time, months in advance is a first draft. Now, we don't have months, we've got a month and plus, but get a draft out the door and let right away your letter writers read it. You should be asking them right now, if you haven't already, hey, this is due January 15th. Could I get a letter from you? And I'm going to send you a draft of my statement of purpose right away. And this will help. They can give you feedback. And also, you'll see that if you give them this stuff in advance, the good persuasive stuff that you're using there will end up in their letter, right? They'll get excited about like, oh yeah, that's I hadn't really put two and two together. But yeah, I can see that. I'm going to write about like, this is why it's important to fund this student. And of course, the obvious, like, language, style, and form should be flawless and persuasive, like no errors, no mistakes. Like, this is not something you write the day before or the day of at all. Months before. You should be writing this. You should be writing this right now. You should sit down and write a draft of this week, when you're done with your finals, and then start chipping away at it, to improve it. Okay, so we've got some that I've got a lot more I could say, but maybe let me turn it over to some Q&A, and we can hear from you, or I can go back to some of the slides earlier. So yeah, if Matt, if you want to can they chime in if they want and chat and unmute themselves?
Yeah, I think everyone should be able to
Okay.
unmute themselves.
Yeah, so in questions?
Court.
Yeah, Court.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure. So for the letter writers for the floss, who should we be approaching for those? I feel, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, right? Because you need 3 recommendations altogether, right? You need
Mhm.
two standard letters and then a language evaluation. Now it's possible, although probably not the most desirable, to have your language writer also be one of your letter recommenders. Students, especially students that are working in a very language-based project, that can be the case, where they get a letter from the language writer. Also, I understand in COVID, it can be very challenging to have a better working relationship with faculty members because it's distance all the time. So I think that's perfectly, like, possible, but not ideal. So I think the perfect blend is faculty that you have, that you are working with most closely. Those are the people who care most about your research, that know mostly about it. This could be at your current institution. This could be at previous institutions. You need to have, you need to think about it like, if you've given your letter's recommendation, will probably be like the letter grade you got when you worked with said faculty members. So people you got A's with, those are the people you should, and that you've impressed, those are the people that should probably write you letters. So yeah, I mean, so I guess the ultimately the strongest letter is the best letter. And I hope faculty have, I think most faculty have enough kind of sense to say, hey, I can't if I can't write you a good letter, I'm not going to write you a strong letter. I'm going to say, find someone else to write you a letter. But I think you have probably a decent sense of who to, these are people who work. And then the further you get along, you know, the less relevant, say a good high school teacher, a letter from them would be. If you're undergraduate, freshman, sophomore, like, okay, maybe, you know, that's fine. But the further you get along, you should be cultivating relationships with people in your field. And this is part of the process. So does that help, Court?
Yeah, it does.
Matt, can you let me start my video shoot. I stopped it there. I tried to share it and it says I don't have permission.
Oh, interesting.
Go to the security shield there and like
There he goes. Yeah. All right. If you'd like to share your video, everyone can now. Nope, not yet. There he goes.
So yeah, thanks, Court. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'll probably reach out to you more specifically.
Yeah, sure. And you know, and
in the next couple days.
Yeah, and then you know, like you know, in our case, like obviously we're working together, and so you know, a good draft of that statement of purpose can be give time to help me inform my letter, but also give feedback about ways to maybe tweak it more effectively. I'm not one of the people on the committee, as I'm not allowed to be, but so I can be a more neutral advice giver to everyone. Other questions?
This is more as a comment. I know this is about the statement and purpose workshop, but since he did ask about a like the recommendations, I know from experience that it's good to also have your CV ready for your recommenders, to also give that to them. Okay, with that said,
Yeah, CV and a draft of your stuff you're submitting is really good. Like, yep.
Noel has someone named Noel.
It's me, but I don't know how my name changed to
Hey.
Noel. Hi, Dr. Eric.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I have one question for my friend. One of my friends, she's interested in flood scholarship. Literally speaking, I also don't know much information about that. So could you please share some information or the resource so that I can share it back to her for flood scholarship?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me share my screen here. 1 second. Let me find that web page. One second here, still finding it. Okay, so I've got with the center's website here. We go to funding, and the Center Foreign Language Area Studies Fellowship. Department of Education provides funding undergraduate and graduate for fellowships academic fellowships cover tuition fees and monthly stipend, intensive language study at approved institutions. And then the application. So you can get some context clues here about the funding. That they're looking for, obviously, language study, intensive academic year, and then summer language funding. If I click on the application here, which I won't because it'll make me click through the multiple stages of the application. It says things like, this grant asks for, are you interested in government service? Are you interested in, the language training as a teacher education? So if you're a teacher in the College of Education, like, you want to emphasize that because they're obviously asking you those questions because they're interested in that's a particular maybe area of emphasis. Or one of the things that we are asked to describe is that if the students are interested in government service, because this money is given from the Department of Education, if students want to go into, and I mean, that could be anything. That doesn't have to be like work for the, go in the State Department or something. Like, if they're interested in government service at any level, that's something that they want to hear about in the letter. So we're supposed to give a few sort of extra points for that. If someone, if they're have financial need. So that's another question, like, just if you have demonstrated financial need and on your FAFSA or other documentation. So those are things that are asked in the application, and that are obviously something you want to mention in an application. And so part of it can be when you're looking through, in this case, if you start applying, making an application there, you'll start to see the true colors of, this is a foreign language area studies fellowship. And these are the kinds of things that they're hinting at. And you bring a good point. We should put that more specifically on the webpage. Some of the criteria they're specified in the application itself, but we could do it in advance to give students, before they actually get to the application, they can think through that. Does that help?
Yes, it is very helpful. Thank you so much. I will share it to her.
Sure. Well, thanks everyone for feel free to reach out to the center, to myself, or to anyone here. We're happy to help for those FLAS applicants. January 15th is the deadline coming up. So keep that in mind. So obviously start that process right now with asking for letters and getting people kind of rousted up and on board. With that, I'll bid adieu and say happy grant writing, and we will, and then good luck on your finals, right? Okay, we'll see you around campus soon. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank you so much.
Yep.